You're listening to Spotlight, the podcast that fosters connections with veterans and military spouses. Here's your host, Bob Louthan.
Welcome, everybody. This is the Spotlight on the Veteran Crowd Network. I'm your host, Bob Louthan. Good afternoon or good evening or good morning, whenever you happen to be listening to our podcast. Pleased to have as my guest today, Bob Pizzini in Virginia Beach. As he said, he is the owner and operator of iFly Virginia Beach. He's also started a program called Elevate Your Leadership, and he's a Navy veteran, having been in EOD. Bob, welcome to the program. Thanks for stepping into the spotlight.
Hey, thank you, Bob. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, it's been fun. We were introduced by a friend of ours. Do a little shout out for Sean Matson at Matbach. He has been on the program before. Good dude, and just really pleased that he's put us together. We've known each other now for 4 or 5 years. I forget. I've been in the chamber twice, and I will admit that my wife flies better than I do, Bob. So, but really a lot of fun. So good to have you on the program.
That's awesome. Sean's a great American, no doubt about it.
He certainly is. So, hey, I'm an Army guy. Let's educate me and some of our guests a little bit. You know, everybody sort of knows about Navy SEALs. They know a little bit less about the SWCC guys and probably nothing about Navy EOD. So let's tell everybody what that's all about, Bob.
Sure. So we're the nation's best kept and most lethal weapon. Best kept secret and most lethal weapon. Now, Navy EOD, explosive ordnance disposal. So we are the bomb squad, if you will. But in a military setting, there's a lot more complexity to it. Navy EOD in particular is responsible for everything to render safe, disarm, and or dispose of every type of ordnance in the world, to include nuclear weapons, to include mines, naval mines, underwater munitions, so we have military free fall capability to get to the target. We have all the diving modalities and diving capabilities to get to the target. We cruise on aircraft carriers. We're responsible for flight deck ordnance. We deploy with all other special forces teams. We deploy with SEAL teams. We deploy with Army Special Forces teams. We deploy organically as an EOD team. So we're a force multiplier, if you will, within all of the special operations forces arenas.
Very interesting. How long were you in the Navy? You spent a little bit of time at it.
Yeah, 26 years. I enlisted when I was 18 years old and retired 26 years later.
Yeah, wow, that's just incredible. I gotta ask a question. First, on the diving side, heard a term in the last 6 months I don't think I'd ever heard before: limpet mines, right? What the hell is a limpet mine? Because evidently those have been a weapon of choice by the Iranians or something. I don't know. Anyway, what is that?
Yeah, so a limpet mine is a mine. It's a swimmer placed mine designed to be placed on the hull of a vessel. It could be placed on a pier or some other underwater structure, but it's a pre-manufactured underwater mine, if you will, designed to disable and or sink vessels at sea. And limpet, L-I-M-P-E-T, I can't remember exactly what that stands for.
Some kind of an acronym.
Yeah, or if that's supposed to resemble the sea creature. I knew that at one point, but
we will put a link in the show notes to a Wikipedia description of what limpet mines are. Okay. So were you an expert diver as well as an expert skydiver? I mean, or did you specialize in one or the other or both?
Yeah, so I hesitate to use the word expert, but before I went to EOD school, I was a first class diver or a mixed gas diver in the Navy, so a deep sea diver. My first 6 years in the Navy, I was a fleet diver, salvage diver, U.S. Navy deep sea diver, and then I went to EOD school. In EOD, we use scuba, We do use surface supplied diving rigs, which is what Navy deep sea divers use. But primarily we use an underwater breathing apparatus called the Mark 16. It's a rebreather, so it doesn't make any noise. It doesn't leave a bubble trail, and its materials are designed so you don't activate mines underwater.
Very interesting. So, but you also did a fair number of the other kinds of diving, the skydiving, both free fall and I guess. And how many jumps did you have in the military? Everybody sort of keeps account of that roughly.
Yeah, so I'll right around 1,000. There's
oh my goodness.
Yeah, well, there's people that have significantly more than that. You know, they spent more of their career involved in military free fall, but I wound up with right around 1,000 when I retired.
It's incredible. Does it now? How does that segue into iFly? Let's talk a little bit about that. You had a love for skydiving, and obviously that led you to consider iFly.
Yeah, so it was really an interesting evolution. My last assignment in uniform was at EOD Training Unit 2 on Fort Story here in Virginia Beach. And I was called the combat support officer. I was responsible for sustainment and advanced training in all things military parachuting and in all things Navy diving. So in that role, I would facilitate training venues, training locations, obviously budgets. And in the military free fall component of that, we would use vertical wind tunnels, as they're kind of generically called. We would use wind tunnels in different parts of the country to simulate the free fall portion of a military free fall, and really develop a very high level of proficiency at free fall in a very short amount of time, as compared to jumping out of the sky, jumping out of an aircraft that many times. So anyway, we would travel to different parts of the country. We would do our training. And while we were there, we would see mom, dad, and the kids, as I like to call them. We would see the 18-year-olds on a date. We would see the 45-year-olds on date night out. We would see the birthday parties and the full civilian business model. And we would always come back to Virginia Beach and say, why isn't there a facility like this in Virginia Beach? What a perfect location with our blend of military, with our tourist destination, and with our, substantial median income, population density, the things the market looks for. So I got serious about that question one day. And 6 years later, we opened our doors.
So give a little history of the iFly network itself. Tell us about when and where that all began, and then we'll drill down on Virginia Beach.
Yeah, for sure. So the first iFly wind tunnel was actually called SkyVenture. It was before iFly franchising was developed. So the first commercial wind tunnel, or the first wind tunnel in America that was available for civilian use, was called SkyVenture, and it was in Orlando, Florida, and it opened in 1998. And this was a big open model that kind of describes the technology. However, still designed by a NASA engineer.
What does an open model mean? It's just blowing out at the top of the building, or?
Yeah, open model means there's basically 4 fans that are directly above the flight chamber, and they're sucking the wind up from the bottom of the flight chamber. So the bottom of the flight chamber is open to the outside. Those 4 fans draw the wind up, and it creates, the cushion of air that people can fly on. And that was designed to be an amusement, an extension of Disney World. It was literally located on International Avenue in Orlando. And when they opened, they had this influx of skydivers that they weren't planning on, and they had military starting to show up for training. So now, kind of a licensing model developed from that. They advanced the technology a little bit, and they sold licenses for other people to invest their own dollars and build similar facilities. And that process went on until roughly 2012, which is when iFly franchising became the only way you could buy the equipment and open a tunnel.
And how many locations does iFly have around the country now?
So there's currently 35 locations. When we opened in 2015, there were we were the 14th location to open.
Interesting. So let's talk a little bit about Bob Pizzini's entrepreneurial journey. You talked about the number of years, from concept to reality. What was, when did you get out of the Navy? When did this idea kind of strike you? Let's talk about, the marathon that was that period of time from concept to opening.
So literally it was a marathon, and that's the analogy I use, because when you run a marathon, which I have, you cannot see the finish line when you start. You don't know if you're going to get to the finish line when you start. You feel awfully determined, and you know you're going to give it everything you have, but having never run a marathon before, you really don't know if you're going to make it.
As an entrepreneur, I would say too that the finish line keeps moving.
Yeah, it sure can. It sure can. So it's a great analogy, and that's the way I used to. People used to say, "Hey, so where are we in this marathon?" And mile 5, mile 6. All of a sudden, we're at mile 12. All of a sudden, one day I could see the finish line. But that journey started in 2010, right when I retired from active duty. I contacted SkyVenture, the manufacturer of the equipment, and I said, "Hey, what's going on in Virginia Beach? There's a lot of rumor here. There's a lot of information that just, doesn't seem credible. What's going on in Virginia Beach?" And their response was, "There's a lot of interest. We're working with some groups right now. If you want to get in line, we'll take your name and number." I said, "Okay, I'll get in line." And I completely forgot about it. And they called me back about 4 months later, and it's ironic.
Kind of like my Redskins tickets, but anyway.
They called me back like 4 months later, and I was literally stepping off the ramp of a C-130 at NAS Oceana, just returning from a 2-week military freefall training mission in Arizona. And the owner of what was SkyVenture back then was on the other end of the phone, and he said, "Are you still interested?" And I said, "Well, where am I in that line?" He said, "You can be at the front of the line if you want." And that really energized me. And that's important that energized me, because it really helped me focus, and it really helped me make up my mind. Am I going to do this or not? And if I'm going to do this, I've got to put every single thing I have into this. And so I went into a research phase, and I decided I'm all in. I'm 100% in. From that point, as much as you learn in the military, you don't learn about business plans and profit and loss statements. And
Right.
I could spend millions of government dollars, but I didn't know how to earn per se in a business setting. So, but one thing that the military is very good at is teaching, and they teach people, they teach military active duty service members how to become very good students, very good learners. So I put myself through a business 101 course through our local area Chamber of Commerce. And that was the starting point. When I finished that course, that just set me on the journey. It showed me really what I needed to do for, the rest of the way. And that also led me to meeting the right people. So I attended this course. I learned how to spell the word business and business plan. I wrote a business plan. And then after I wrote the business plan, I realized I need help. So I hired a consultant who really knew how to write a business plan. And in the process, he kind of became a mentor or tutor, if you will, and really taught me the language of business. And my strategy all along was make myself presentable and my business plan presentable to an investor. And then when I have that investor, we can go to a bank and get a bank. And that's exactly the way the strategy played out. When I thought my business plan was ready for prime time, I made a list of 10 potential investors. First one said no. Second one said no. The third one said, we've heard of this. We're familiar with this. Why don't you go look these 10 or 20 or 30 things up, and let's meet again in a month. That process went on for about a year. And, about a year later, I walked into the boardroom for, what seemed to become a routine meeting. And there were a few other people in there who said, let's get this thing done. So I got an investor on board, just one. I'm the managing partner. The way we structured the operating agreement is that I am the managing partner. The investor is The investor is Tory Breeden, by the way, the Breeden Company.
Mm-hmm.
And they are very successful business people in this area. And by having the investor on board, it was still challenging to get a bank, because back then you say indoor skydiving and everybody goes, what's that?
Right.
But we were able to bring the bank. And again, now that was going back 8 or 9 years. And
this is no small undertaking either. I mean, you're building a pretty substantial operation in the heart of the oceanfront district in Virginia Beach. So no shortage of zoning issues and others. Let me go back to something you asked earlier. The original tunnel was an open system. I'm imagining that your existing tunnel maybe is. Do you call it a closed system?
Yeah, we call it recirculating. Actually, thanks for that. We call it recirculating.
Wouldn't want somebody walking down Pacific Avenue and getting sucked into the system, you know?
Yeah, yeah. No, we're a normal looking building. It's somewhat of a different looking building, but at the end of the day, it's a normal looking building. Yep. But inside, first we built the recirculating air system, and then we built the building around the equipment, if you will. But we have 4 motors, 350 horsepower each, electrically driven. The motors drive the fans, rather. And they're on the 4th floor of the building, and they're actually offset to the right and to the left of the main flight chamber. So the wind is generated. I got to get in frame here. The wind is generated in this kind of loop. So it's generated, and right here is where we fly. Right. In the flight chamber itself.
What you can dial up and down the speed in the chamber. I mean, what kind of speeds can you generate in that wind tunnel?
So we our maximum speed is 160 miles per hour. So a good solid Category 5 hurricane.
That would pin you against the ceiling, though, pretty much, wouldn't it?
Well, and that's where human body flight comes into play. So I can fly at 160 miles an hour. But I have to get really small, or I have to fly my body in a way that I don't get pinned against, the ceiling or one of the walls or something. But we vary the wind speed down. We fly kids as young as 3. And when we get kids that small, the wind speed is probably in the neighborhood of 50 to 60 miles an hour.
Wow.
Yeah.
When I was in there, I think it was around 100, give or take.
That's about where you would be. I'd say about 100, between 100 and 110,
right. Depending
on kind of how baggy the flight suit is.
How big my beer belly was. So families come in there. I'll never forget you telling me the first time I walked in there was a dad and bringing the kids. It was kind of a rainy day. And I think the dad was sitting there going, why am I having to do this? And by the time his kids got in there, the smile across his face was just incredible. So it's really a great family activity.
Yeah, it really is. And I call that the grumpy dad story because, mom made the reservation and he figures out what's going on. And he's like, we're paying how much for what? Something I've never even heard of. And so he walks through the door, a little bit unhappy, a little bit grumpy. But by the time they leave, the family had a great experience. The kids did great. Mom did great. Dad did great. And so it's a wonderful thing to see on a daily basis. I kind of changed our mission statement a little bit. Our mission statement as it stands is we deliver the dream of flight. But what I've noticed is we bring people together through the dream of flight. And so kind of like that grumpy dad story, people root for each other. People want to see each other succeed. This is something that people perceive as challenging. Some people have anxiety. You talked about your wife's experience.
Yep.
But by the end of it, we could have 2 families that didn't know each other before in the same group of 12 flying. And they're high-fiving each other, congratulating each other. And it's just the neatest thing in the world to see every day.
Yeah, we're talking with Bob Pizzini, who's the owner of iFly Virginia Beach. And, you mentioned my wife. So I took her there for my anniversary recently, and very anxious breakfast that morning. But I tell you, she's been telling all of her girlfriends about it. She had a fabulous time. To all the husbands out there, take your wife indoor skydiving at iFly. Trust me. So you also have clubs and you have competition. It's amazing for me to get in there and to watch some of these these competition athletes get in there, and they'll get 3 or 4 of them in there buzzing around like yellow jackets inside of that place.
Yeah,
Really
we call
something to
that.
see.
Yeah, we call that four-way dynamic flying. It is. So, the experience of indoor skydiving, I equate it to ice sports. I'm a hockey coach, as you know, and I equate it to ice sports. So if you go skating one Sunday afternoon, one time, in a year, that's an amusement. If you go skating every Sunday afternoon or one Sunday every month, that becomes more of a recreational activity. And then if you become a trained figure skater or a trained hockey player, this is a sport. And in indoor skydiving, it's the exact same thing. When that family shows up, usually it's a one and done, and it was an amusement. But oftentimes, that 10-year-old says, "Mom, Dad, I want to do more of this." So we have a youth league where we have, and it's an athletic process. So we have a youth league. We have a membership program where we have about 250 people in our membership program. Some of them fly competitively, some of them just fly recreationally. And then, as you mentioned, we hosted the U.S. National Championship for the last 3 years. Now, indoor skydiving is a world sport. So when we host the U.S. National Championship, we actually select the U.S. team that will participate in either a World Cup or a World Championship, depending on if it's an even year or odd year.
So it's kind of like synchronized diving. I mean, it's just incredible to watch some of these teams get in there and do all these coordinated moves together. It's like dancing in the sky almost.
It is. And that's another reason I compare it to like figure skating. So in figure skating, you have a solo category. And in indoor skydiving, we have what's called a solo freestyle category. Mm-hmm. Then we have what's called a solo speed category, where you have to do all these maneuvers in a certain amount of time. And then we have what's called two-way dynamic. So now you and a partner are flying and you're doing these particular routines. And then figure skating doesn't have a four-person sport or competition, but we do. We have a four-way dynamic for indoor skydiving. So it can be solo, 2 people, 4 people.
Wow. So every time I've been in there, also a group of real strong looking guys will come in sort of casually dressed, and you have some military contracts that train in there. Talk a little bit about that side of the business, and then we're gonna talk about elevate your leadership.
Sure. So, it kind of goes back to the beginning of iFly Virginia Beach in my military experience. This is necessary training, and it is so highly effective. What you can learn for your military mission, what you can learn in a wind tunnel and become proficient at in 30 minutes would take you probably the better part of a year. If you had good weather conditions and airplanes that didn't break down. And, we know that those things will delay you throughout the year. So it's very, very effective in teaching military free fall. Keep in mind, military free fallers, we wear equipment bags, and we might have different things attached to our body to meet the mission requirements. So this is a great place to get the bugs worked out, some RDT&E, if you will. But it's also a great way to develop your skill set, sustain your skill set, and advance it. So we do have a fair amount of military training in this facility, and I proudly say that we are the world's premier military training facility when it comes to indoor skydiving, and that's because of my background and because of my staff. This team is just an incredible team. I have a lot of veterans on my team. Mm-hmm. We have great relationships with all of our military customers. And we really try to make sure we're meeting their needs. Their needs can be redefined from time to time, believe it or not.
Well, the proximity there where you are in Virginia Beach to the Navy and the Air Force and the Army. You've got folks coming in from out of state, though, as well, to train there occasionally?
We get people from all over the world, out of state for sure, but also from all over the world. The international stuff with COVID, we haven't had any international training since COVID, and the World Cup and the World Championship hasn't happened either. But in a non-COVID environment, we train special forces from around the world.
So we had a veteran crowd event at iFly back in December. Brought a group of people in there before COVID. Looking forward to doing that again, Bob. That was a lot of fun. Let's
We
shift gears a little bit. You know, you have started a program called Elevate Your Leadership. You are starting to conduct. You were doing in-person events. Now you're doing online webinars teaching the elements and the components of leadership. Let's talk about what was the genesis of that? How did that come about? And then let's drill down a little bit about on some of the things that you actually do during the webinar series.
Sure. So two things kind of coalesced at once. One is when we built iFly, we built a big, beautiful boardroom on the third floor of the building that overlooks the ocean, which is right there in front of me. It's all natural light coming through the windows. A beautiful sunny day here at the oceanfront. But we built that so companies could hold corporate events here, corporate offsites, team building events, strategic planning, client appreciation. So as those clients were coming in the building and using our facility, they would bring a coach or a trainer with them from time to time, or that they would ask us if we could find a coach or a trainer to help facilitate whatever their needs were. And we gladly did that. At the same time, I was looking for leadership training for my leadership team. I have 6 people on my leadership team, or, often referred to as my management team, but, general manager, customer service manager, sales and marketing manager. But really, these managers are in charge of other people, which makes them leaders. And I needed leadership training. So we did Franklin Covey and we did Dale Carnegie and a few other things, brought in some trainers and some coaches. And these were all good processes that I still have takeaways from, but it wasn't the leadership training that I was exposed to throughout my military career. In the military, you have to attend some type of leadership training before you can promote to the next level. And then almost immediately you're put in that leadership role. And almost immediately you fail in some capacity, but your leadership is there to catch you and to make sure that you fail forward. But that over time that becomes very empowering, and it gives you great confidence and competence in your ability to lead. And that I couldn't find anywhere. So I developed a program that I delivered to my leadership team, and it was really a compilation of my 26 years in the military and my 10 years in the private sector, both successes and failures. And believe me, there's been plenty of failures. But I put that curriculum together. I delivered it to my team. And one of my core beliefs is that leadership is a perishable skill. So I delivered this to my team on a reoccurring basis. So it developed and it evolved, and I really enjoyed doing it and learning more myself. And people outside the organization saw what I was doing, and they thought I had something very unique that I should take to the market, because nobody out there, with all the leadership offerings that are out there, nobody was approaching it the way I was. And, I combined, if we do it at my facility, which is the way it was designed at iFly, then we throw some flight time in there as well to help in the team building.
Building side of it.
Yeah, team building and leadership building.
So one of the segments, let's tease the audience a little bit with one of the segments from your leadership, and it's called The Science of Leadership. I learned all kinds of new words like parasympathetic and some other things. But talk a little bit about some of the things that you go to and how the mind and the body work to help you be a better leader.
Yeah, absolutely. So the science of leadership, one of my components is called the art and science of leadership. And that's not a new term for anybody, but the way I define the science of leadership is different than any definition you've ever heard before. And my definition of the science of leadership is that rest, hydration, nutrition, exercise, brain and heart health, and lifelong learning are so interrelated that a change in any one of those 6 components could affect one or all of the other components. And all 6 of those components are critical to good leadership on a daily basis. Leaders have to be well rested, well hydrated, well nourished. You have to exercise on a regular basis to maintain good brain and heart health. And then lifelong leaders are lifelong learners, and any good leader will tell you that. So for me, that's the science behind leadership. And I dig into each one of those 6 things throughout the guided discussion. So we'll just start with rest, for example. Most people get the correct amount of rest, which is roughly 7 to 9 hours for an adult. But when we're not well rested, we have a tendency, if we're going to make poor decisions, it not being well rested contributes significantly to poor decision making. Same thing with hydration, believe it or not, same thing with nutrition. So all of these things are critical to leadership, to good leadership.
The rest thing runs counter to our training in the military. I mean, there's all this sleep deprivation training that we got in the service. Is there an argument to be made that that's does more harm than good?
I think so. I mean, I experienced all that during my career as well. But what happens is what I've, I just turned 55, so I'm big double nickels now. But what I've experienced over time is that lack of rest can have a negative cumulative effect. And I don't mean in terms of days or weeks. I'm talking in terms of years. So if I want to be engaged and active and on top of my game at the age of 55 or the age of 60, I have to develop good habits, early in my professional life. And being well rested is one of those good habits. Same thing with hydration, same thing with nutrition, exercise. I'll just fast forward to that real quick. To explain the words you used, neuroplasticity and sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. The science behind this is just rock solid, and it's something I wish I would have been exposed to 25 years ago, but the science was not rock solid 25 years ago. And quite simply, when you exercise, when you elevate your heart rate to 60 to 85% of your age recommended maximum heart rate, neuroplasticity in your brain activates like you flip a light switch. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to grow, change, adapt, and heal. Throughout my adult life, my professional life, my greatest moments of clarity, or, when I really had to solve a problem, I had those aha moments either during rigorous exercise or immediately after. Why? Because my neuroplasticity was activated in my brain because I elevated my heart rate. Again, scientifically proven. And this effect is the same on just about everybody in the population. There's another aspect related to neuroplasticity, but more so driven by what's called your autonomic nervous system. And that's a sympathetic reaction and a parasympathetic reaction. Sympathetic, fight, flight, or freeze, tiger's chasing me. Parasympathetic, rest and digest. You bring everything back under control. From a leadership perspective, when something dramatic occurs that elevates your heart rate, that increases your blink rate, that narrows your peripheral vision, your sympathetic nervous system is taking over. When that happens, it's literally taking you out of the driver's seat. And so that's when you're going to have a tendency to make decisions that are poor, that are emotionally based, or decisions that you otherwise regret at some point in the future. But when you recognize, and sympathetic gets triggered all day long, somebody cuts you off, something unexpected happens, your body is constantly transitioning between sympathetic and parasympathetic. But if you know that, and if you recognize your sympathetic system activating, you can counter that. You can activate your parasympathetic nervous system and put yourself back in control. And knowing how your brain and your heart communicate with each other is critical to good leadership. It keeps you in the driver's seat. And of course, the discussion has greater detail. I'm just hitting the wave tops, but it's incredible science, and it's proven, and I use it on a daily basis.
I've shared this story some in the past, but I get some of my best ideas in the shower after I've worked out. So much so that one person suggested I put a whiteboard in there, and another friend of mine literally sent me some waterproof Post-it notes with a little pencil so you can write down so that you can remember things. Because unfortunately, at my age, it doesn't take long for me to remember something I was supposed to do that I got asked to do 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So, You know,
I'm suffering from that as well. We're all heading in that direction. It's just, through rest, hydration, nutrition, exercise, brain and heart health, and lifelong learning, we can slow how fast we're going.
I love your phrase, leadership is a perishable skill. I might use that as the title for the landing page for this podcast. But I just really like that a lot. What are some things that that you would suggest that leaders in business are doing with their people to cultivate leadership in their teams and to keep from losing some of these leadership skills? I mean, how do you keep them sharp?
Yeah. So, again, that's kind of, it's the military paradigm, which is you have to revisit these things on a regular basis or they do perish. Just like a musician has to rehearse with their instrument to do their part in the orchestra, or an athlete has to practice their individual skill set so they can contribute at the team level.
Does it become subconscious with practice, so to speak?
Some of it does. Well, I actually conscious. I would call it conscious. Okay. You want to bring these tools of leadership to your conscious mind. So when it's time for you to act, when it's time for you to be, the great leader, if you will, you've got those tools and those that foundation. You've got those processes in your conscious mind, and you say to yourself, "All right, which application am I going to apply in this situation?" Or okay, here's the situation. I'm going to make sure I'm going to be a visionary. I'm going to be a bit of a coach. I'm going to use some referent authority here. Whatever it is, you want that stuff to be in your conscious mind. There's something called unconscious. Unconscious. Oh, it's escaping me here.
Hey, see?
Yeah.
You got to write this stuff down. I'm going to send you the waterproof Post-it notes, Bob.
Yeah. There's something called unconscious competency. Okay. So unconscious competency is what it's like when we drive our cars, right? We've been driving for so long. We don't even think about it, hand over hand, 10 and 2. We don't think about any of that crap. We get in the car and we go, and unconsciously we drive from point A to point B. When you're 15 years old, you have what's called conscious incompetency. The conscious part is, I know I need to learn how to drive. The incompetency is, but I don't know how to drive. Mm-hmm. So you do something about it. You train yourself. Then you go to conscious competency. Okay, I'm driving 10 and 2, you know how to do it, but you got to think about it. And then you get so good at it, it becomes unconscious competency. I know that's a lot, but the point is simple. In leadership, the unconscious competency is rare and short-lived. Again, it goes back to the perishable aspect of leadership. You have to revisit the basics. General Mattis, be brilliant at the basics. Mm-hmm. You have to revisit the basics of your foundation in leadership on a regular basis. And I say your foundation because different leaders have different styles. There's different power types, different personalities, and you have to build your foundation. That's what I call the art of leadership. We build out a foundation based on my personal brand, based on what I'm comfortable with, what I'm good at, my communication skills. You build out your basics, and that sits in the conscious mind.
So in the last couple of minutes here, what are some other elements of the Elevate Your Leadership program? Just section titles, maybe, to tease a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I got one closing question for you.
Okay. So we talked about the art of leadership, then the science of leadership. I have something else I call critical traits of a leader. So we look at things like the 5 whys. Ask why 5 times before you get to that 5th why. You'll know the root of whatever issue is in front of you. Be a student leader, look to learn, allow your team members to share with you what they know and how good they are. So that's some components of critical traits of a leader. Then I also have something called verses in leadership. So lead versus manage, voice versus vote, culture versus climate, performance versus behavior. These are verses or dilemmas that are faced daily by leaders. If you have 5 people or more in your organization, you face every one of those situations almost on a daily basis. So we have a nice little discussion regarding that. And I also go into culture and values and how leaders affect culture and values, how leaders really need to pay attention and make sure you're doing the right thing regarding culture and values. So those are kind of the highlights.
That's the highlights. So we're going to put things out there for everybody to learn more about Bob Pizzini and elevate your leadership. One closing question for you. I know in the room where you're seated, there are a lot of books on the wall. What's maybe one of your favorite books, and are you going to take Elevate Your Leadership and write a book yourself?
So one of my goals, second question first, one of my goals for next year is to write that book. It's essentially written through all of my course content. All of my material is original material. Or if I'm sharing a story, I'll certainly cite the source. But through my writings on LinkedIn and through my course content and through podcasts and forums like this, I've got a book written. I just need to formalize it. Mm-hmm. And then, so that was the second question. First question was, I'm sorry, I forgot the first question.
What's the most influential book on that bookshelf then, since you haven't written yours yet?
Yeah. So,
soon to be the second most influential book on the shelf.
Yeah, exactly. So it's hard to mention one. I'm going to mention three. Okay. So one is called Financial Intelligence for Entrepreneurs. And I strongly recommend any entrepreneur or business owner read this book. It tells you how to read your profit and loss statement, your balance sheet, your cash flow statement. But what's important, it doesn't just tell you how to read it. It tells you how to extract very important information. Am I reinvesting enough in infrastructure, in facility, in training? It really helps you make sure that you're running the business properly. So Financial Intelligence for Entrepreneurs. Second book I would recommend is called Unstuck. And it is a book, ironically, written to help people get out of clinical depression. So it's a book all about the brain, right? But when you first start reading this book, you're going to go, why am I reading this? I'm not clinically depressed. But by the time you get to the end of the book, what this psychoanalyst is recommending for clinical depression is stuff that everybody should do every day. Mm-hmm. It's about brain and heart health. So that book is called Unstuck, written by Peterson, I believe is the author's last name. And then the third one would be The Body Keeps the Score, written by Basil van der Kolk. And another psychoanalyst, and it's another book
3 times fast.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that one is also, it's about brain health. It's about PTSD. It's about TBI. So for military people, this book actually came to me through a veterans treatment program. But so those are the 3 books: The Body Keeps the Score, Unstuck, and Financial Intelligence for Entrepreneurs.
Fantastic advice. So, well, listen, we've come to the conclusion here. We've been listening to Bob Pizzini, who is the owner and founder of iFly in Virginia Beach, and also does Elevate Your Leadership, and encourage everybody to check out Elevate Your Leadership. Check into the webinar program, and when we get out of COVID, he'll be doing them face-to-face again, I'm sure. Right. Bob, thank you so much for stepping into the spotlight.
Hey, thank you, Bob. It's a pleasure to be in the spotlight on the Veteran Crowd Network. And like I said, it's just always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So you've been listening to the Spotlight on the Veteran Crowd Network. We air on Tuesdays and Fridays and bring veterans and military spouses that have been making a difference in our community out on our podcast. Again, thank you so much to Bob Pizzini in Virginia Beach. Bravo Zulu to you. And that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to Spotlight by Veteran Crowd. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and uploads, please visit our website at veterancrowdnetwork.com. We'll see you next time.